The sound came sharp and wrong, a wet crack that split the mountain air. Then a woman cried out, low and broken, like breath torn from her chest. High on the shoulder of the Colorado Rockies, a man stopped mid-step. Snow dust slid from a ledge. Pine boughs stilled. He listened again. Another strike, another sob. His boots turned downslope without thought. The mountains had taught him many sounds: hunger, wind, death. This one was different. It was cruelty, and it was close. Below, the sun burned copper against stone, and somewhere in that light, someone was being hurt, who would bleed before nightfall, and who would not survive alone. They called him Caleb Holloway, a name passed quietly between trappers who rarely saw him twice. Caleb lived where trails gave up, where the ridges grew too steep for wagons and the silence pressed heavy as snow. He spoke little, needed less. The mountains were not empty to him. They were precise, honest. If you listened, they told you what would kill you and what might let you live. He moved now like part of them, down shale and through spruce. No sound, no rush, only purpose. The cabin appeared suddenly, squatting in a clearing like something ashamed to be seen. And beside it, in the dirt, a woman lay curled around herself. A man stood over her. He held a hickory switch, worn smooth by years of use. Each time it rose, it whistled. Each time it fell, flesh answered. The man's face was hard, pale with certainty. Not anger, conviction. "You brought filth into my house," he said, voice steady. "You will learn what that costs." The woman made no plea. She had learned those were wasted. Her dress was torn at the shoulder. Blood streaked her arm. Her breath came shallow and fast. Near her, a wooden crate shook with thin cries. Two voices, small, desperate. Caleb saw everything, and did nothing, yet. The man struck again, then stopped. He coiled the switch like rope after work, looked down once more, not at his daughter's face, but at the crate. "Bastards," he muttered. Then he turned and walked toward the trees. Only when the forest swallowed him did Caleb move. He stepped into the clearing like a shadow made solid. The woman flinched, raising her arms weakly, her body braced for more pain. She did not look at his face. She only saw boots, a man's shape, enough to make her shake. No blow came. Instead, a canteen touched the dirt near her hand. Caleb backed away 2 steps and stopped. He looked not at her wounds but toward the tree line, giving space, giving dignity. After a long moment, thirst won over fear. Her fingers closed around the canteen. She drank, spilling half down her chin, sobbing once when the cool water hit her throat. When she finished, she set it down with care, like something borrowed. Her eyes lifted then, just briefly. He was big, broad through the shoulders, beard dark with frost at the tips. His eyes were gray, still, not unkind, not curious either, as if he had already decided something and was simply waiting for the world to catch up. He turned to the crate. Inside lay 2 newborn girls, wrapped in rags, faces red and scrunched with hunger. Caleb's hands, scarred and strong, slid beneath the rough wood. He lifted them as if lifting glass. Then he held out his other hand to the woman. She hesitated. Every lesson of her life screamed at her to crawl away. Men took, men judged, men hurt. Yet something in the way he waited made space for choice. Her name was Eliza Boone, and she was very tired of choosing pain. She placed her bruised fingers in his palm. His grip was firm, careful. He pulled her up without jarring her back, steadying her when her legs buckled. She swayed once, then stood. They left without looking back. The path he took did not look like a path. It twisted through rock and brush, vanished, reappeared. Liza stumbled. Each time, his arm was there. Silent, solid. He carried the crate in one arm, never tilted it, never rushed. They reached a hidden fold in the mountain where stone opened into shadow, a cave, masked by laurel and thyme. Inside, the air was cool and clean. A spring whispered somewhere deep within. Caleb set the babies down on pine needles softened by hand. He knelt beside Eliza and began to clean her wounds. Water. Buckskin. Movements sure and respectful. When he pressed a dark green paste to the welts on her back, she gasped at the sting. "Breathe," he said quietly. It was the first word he had spoken. Night came. The babies cried, hungry, relentless. Eliza's body trembled as she tried to give them what little she could. Caleb watched once, then stood. He was gone before she could ask where. Fear crawled back into her chest. She rocked the girls, whispered apologies. The cave felt larger without him, colder. Then, near moonrise, a shape returned. Caleb led a small cream-colored goat on a braided rope. He moved slow, calm. He spoke to it like wind through grass. Somehow, impossibly, he coaxed milk into a tin cup, warmed it, tested it, then passed it to Eliza. She laughed once, a broken sound, then cried. Days followed a new rhythm. He hunted, he gathered, he watched. She healed, she fed, she learned his silences. He carved small animals from aspen scraps, set the babies where sunlight touched stone. Each night he sat at the cave mouth, a dark outline against stars, keeping the world out. Eliza watched him when he thought she slept, this man of the high places. She had been told men like him were beasts. Yet every scar on her back had been given by her own blood, and every kindness by a stranger. As the moon grew round, her strength returned, so did thought. Questions, needs. She would have to go to town, to Ridgeway, for salt, cloth, soap. When she told him, halting and unsure, he listened, then nodded once. Before she left, he pressed a beaver pelt into her hands, soft, perfect, worth more than pity. She did not know then that town judgment would drive her back into the mountains, or that the peace she had found would be tested by fire and flood and blood. She only knew this. For the first time since her girls were born, she was not alone. And somewhere beyond the ridges, a past she had fled was beginning to stir. Morning came soft and pale, slipping into the cave like a careful guest. Eliza woke to the sound of water dripping somewhere in the dark. The twins lay quiet for once, their small chests rising and falling in uneven rhythm. Outside, wind moved through pine needles with a low hush. Caleb was already awake. He crouched near the entrance, sharpening his knife on a smooth stone, slow strokes, even pressure, not a sound wasted. He glanced back once, checking on them, then returned to his work. That look stayed with her. It wasn't ownership or duty. It was watchfulness, the kind that didn't demand thanks. The days settled into a pattern that felt unreal in its steadiness. At dawn, Caleb would leave, moving uphill with bow and pack. By midday, he returned with grouse, or rabbit, sometimes venison if luck favored him. Eliza learned to read his face. The slight tightening around the eyes when food had been scarce. The looseness when the hunt had gone well. She healed slowly. Bruises faded from purple to yellow. The skin on her back itched as it closed. Caleb showed her how to grind roots and leaves, how to mix them with water into poultices that drew out heat and pain. His instructions were brief, demonstrations instead of speeches. He never asked about her father, never asked where the girl's father was. That silence felt like mercy. At dusk, the goat appeared, always at the edge of the clearing. Caleb would lead it close, milk it, warm the cup, then hand it to Eliza. She fed the twins carefully, whispering to them, as if afraid the mountains might overhear and take offense. She named them Anna and Maeve. Caleb nodded when she told him, said nothing more. A week passed, then 2. Eliza grew stronger, strong enough to stand longer, to walk farther, to help. She swept the cave floor, gathered pine needles, watched closely as Caleb worked, storing each movement away like a map. She noticed things too, how he always sat with his back to stone, how his eyes lifted at sounds she could not hear, how he never slept deeply, even when exhausted. One morning she told him she needed to go to town. He looked at her then, really looked. "To Ridgeway," she said, "just for supplies, salt, cloth. I won't be long." Silence stretched. The fire popped. At last he nodded, reached into his pack and pulled out the beaver pelt, placed it in her hands. Their fingers touched. Just briefly, the contact sent a strange warmth up her arm. She left at first light. The path down felt longer alone. The mountains watched her without comment. By the time Ridgeway came into view, her heart had tightened into something hard and small. The town was all straight lines and right angles. Wooden storefronts, muddy street, a church steeple cutting into the sky like a blade. Eyes followed her. She felt it before she heard it. The hush, the way women paused mid-sentence, the way men looked and then looked away. She stepped into the general store, breathing through her nose, counting steps. She laid the pelt on the counter. The storekeeper raised his brows. Surprise flickered, then something colder. Before he could speak, the bell over the door rang. "Why, if it isn't Eliza Boone!" The voice was sweet. Too sweet. She turned slowly. Martha Hale, the preacher's wife, stood with two other women at her side. Their eyes skimmed Eliza's body, her worn dress, her empty hands. "We were worried," Martha said, "after all that trouble, and now with children." Eliza said nothing. "Twins, I hear," Martha continued, "and no husband. Such a burden. Where is your father?" The question cut clean. Eliza's throat closed. The store felt smaller, air thinner. "I need salt," she said, her voice barely carried. Martha smiled. "Of course." "Charity is important." Eliza turned and walked out. She did not take the salt, or the cloth, or the pelt. She ran until her lungs burned and the town fell away behind her. Shame chased her all the way up the trail, whispering old words she thought she had buried. By the time she reached the cave, night was falling. Caleb was there, waiting. He saw her empty hands, her red eyes. He said nothing. Just took the canteen from his pack and handed it to her. She drank, then leaned against the stone and cried without sound. That night, the mountains held them close. The weather changed 2 days later. It began with light, a strange brass color coating the peaks. The air grew heavy. Still, insects vanished. Even the birds went quiet. Caleb stiffened. He packed fast, motioned for Eliza to gather the babies. They moved deeper into the cave, through a narrow crack she had never noticed. It opened into a small chamber higher up, tight, safe. The storm broke like the sky had split. Rain fell in sheets. Wind screamed through the valley. The ground shook as water tore loose stone and soil. A roar rose from below, louder than thunder. Eliza held the twins close, humming through clenched teeth. The mountain trembled. Somewhere, something gave way. When dawn came, the world was changed. The clearing was gone, scoured clean. Mud and rock piled where trees had stood. The laurel curtain was torn away. And the goat was gone. Caleb found the tracks, large, heavy, ending in blood and churned earth. Eliza sank to her knees. Without the milk, the babies cried, thin, hungry. Caleb hunted longer, returned with less. He made broth from bones and meat, strained thin. It was not enough. He knew it. She knew it. Eliza began to gather again, roots, berries, anything she remembered him touching. Her hands blistered, her back ached. Still she went. One evening Caleb returned empty-handed. He saw the small pile of roots by the fire, looked at them, then at her. Something shifted. He nodded once, slower this time. Partners. The next morning, Anna coughed. A dry sound, small, but wrong. By nightfall, her skin burned hot beneath Eliza's hand. Caleb knelt beside them, touched the baby's brow, listened to her breathing. His jaw tightened. He stood and pointed north, toward the high peaks. "Columbine," he said. Then he was gone. Eliza watched his shape disappear into the stone, and prayed he would come back. The first night alone was the hardest. Eliza sat with Anna pressed to her chest, counting breaths instead of time. The baby's skin burned beneath her palm. Each cough was a thin, tearing sound that scraped Eliza's nerves raw. Maeve slept fitfully beside them, unaware of the quiet war being fought inches away. The mountain, once her shelter, felt vast and indifferent again. She kept the fire low, whispered songs her own mother once sang before silence took her place. She spoke to Anna as if words alone could anchor her to this world, promised things she did not know how to give. Morning came, then afternoon. No Caleb. By the second night, fear settled into Eliza's bones. Anna's breathing grew shallow. Her cries weakened. Eliza crushed the last herbs she knew. Bathed the child's brow with cool water. Nothing changed. She did not sleep. On the third day, clouds crept low across the peaks. Eliza's voice grew hoarse from whispering prayers she had never believed in before. Then, near dusk, stone shifted outside the cave. She looked up. Caleb stumbled into the clearing. His coat was torn, blood soaked the sleeve at his forearm. His face was drawn tight with exhaustion, but in his hand, clutched like a promise, were pale blue flowers. Delicate, almost fragile enough to vanish. He dropped to his knees without a word and crushed the petals between two stones. Eliza rushed to him, adding water, steadying his shaking hands. Together, they fed the medicine to Anna. Then there was nothing to do but wait. They sat side by side through the long night. Firelight danced against the cave walls. At one point, Eliza's hand brushed his. Neither moved away. Just before dawn, Anna's breathing eased. The heat faded slowly, like a storm retreating. Eliza broke. She covered her face and cried into her palms, quiet, shaking. Caleb sat beside her, unmoving, keeping watch while hope returned breath by breath. When the sun rose, Anna slept deep and calm. The mountain felt kinder again. Days passed. Healing followed. Caleb spoke more, just a little, names of plants, signs of weather. The way clouds gathered before snow, Eliza listened, learned, repeated the words until they stuck. She tended his wounded arm, cleaned it carefully. Her touch made him tense, then ease. Something unspoken passed between them in those moments. Gratitude, respect, something deeper neither dared to name. Peace returned, softer than before. Until the day Caleb came back from patrol with different eyes. Sharper, harder. That night he sharpened his knife long after the fire burned low. Again and again, the sound scraped through the quiet. Eliza felt it before she understood it. The next morning he led her down trail to a patch of soft earth. There, pressed into the mud, were horse tracks. Shod, fresh. Beside them, boot prints. Her father. The fear that rose in her was old, familiar. But this time, it did not hollow her. It hardened her. Caleb did not speak. He didn't need to. They prepared. He showed her a hidden climb. A ledge high above the clearing. A place to hide if needed. He rearranged stones. Set traps that looked like accidents. The valley became something else. No longer a home. A battleground. The men arrived 2 days later. Eliza heard them first. Voices, harsh, complaining. She gathered the twins and slipped into the fissure behind the cave, pressed herself against stone, held her breath as a man stepped close enough she could hear his spurs jingle. One baby stirred. Eliza hummed, low and desperate. The man paused, then moved on. When Caleb returned, she told him everything with her eyes, with the way her hands shook. He nodded once. That night, she went to him. "I won't run again," she said. He met her gaze, saw the fire there, the resolve. He nodded again. The next morning, they left the cave. High above, Eliza watched as her father stepped into the clearing, his rifle slung easy, confidence heavy on his shoulders. The hired man followed close behind. "Come out," her father called. "This ends today." The answer did not come from the cave. Caleb stepped from the shadows across the valley. Still, silent, unmoving. Her father sneered, ordered the hired man forward. The trap sprang. Stones fell. A scream cut short. The hired man lay pinned and broken. Her father raised his rifle. Caleb did not move. Something passed between them then, a truth older than words, the mountain choosing its own. Her father's hands trembled, his certainty cracked. He lowered the rifle. He fled. Caleb freed the hired man with cold efficiency, spoke one word. "Go." When it was over, he climbed to Eliza. She took his hand. The past loosened its grip at last. But freedom brought questions. That night, Caleb spoke of another valley, of people who live by different rules, where strength mattered more than shame. Eliza listened, and chose. They left days later. The journey was hard, but it was forward. When they reached the hidden settlement, smoke curled from chimneys. Children laughed by a creek. Women worked without watching her with narrowed eyes. Caleb told her story plainly. The people listened and accepted her. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the peaks, Eliza stood beside Caleb and watched her daughters sleep safe and unafraid. For the first time, she believed it. This was not the end. It was the beginning. The valley breathed differently than the high ridges. Eliza felt it the first morning she woke there. The air was softer. Not easy, but kinder. Smoke drifted from stone chimneys. A creek ran clear and steady, its sound weaving through the low murmur of voices and the knock of tools on wood. Life was happening. Openly. She stepped from the small cabin they had been given, Anna tied close to her chest, Maeve still asleep inside. A woman passed carrying a bucket. She nodded once. No questions. No looks that lingered too long. It unsettled Eliza more than cruelty ever had. Caleb was already outside, speaking with two men near the trading shed. They stood close, heads bent, voices low. He listened more than he spoke, as always. When he glanced her way, she felt steadied, anchored. The days filled quickly. Eliza learned where to gather water, where to wash clothes, how to trade roots and berries for cloth and salt without begging. No one asked her story outright. They waited. The mountain folk understood that truth arrived in its own time. Her hands grew rougher, stronger. She mended nets, helped skin game, watched other women move through their work with quiet confidence. At night she slept without flinching at every sound. Caleb remained near, but never close enough to crowd her. He repaired the cabin roof, reinforced the door. Hung a small carved hawk above the hearth. Protection, watchfulness. The twins thrived. Their cries grew strong. Their eyes followed movement with bright curiosity. Sometimes, Caleb would sit on the cabin step and let them grip his fingers, his large hands impossibly gentle. Eliza noticed how others watched him, with respect, with trust. One evening, Ezra, the older trapper, sat beside the fire and spoke plainly. "Your father won't stop," he said. "Not a warning, a fact." Eliza nodded. She already knew. "Men like that don't lose," Ezra continued. "They only retreat." That night, sleep came harder. 2 days later, a boy ran into the settlement breathless. "Riders," he said, "from the south." Caleb stood immediately. The valley shifted. Men gathered rifles. Women drew children close. No panic, just preparation. Eliza felt fear rise, sharp and cold, but she did not freeze. She strapped the twins to her back and moved where she was told. Caleb found her near the creek. "Stay with Sarah," he said quietly. She searched his face. "You're going?" He nodded once. Something in her chest tightened. Not terror, resolve. "Come back," she said. His eyes held hers, steady, certain. He left without another word. The riders never reached the valley. They were turned back at the pass, warned, watched. The message was clear. This place was not unguarded, not weak. When Caleb returned at dusk, dust on his boots and tension still in his shoulders, Eliza let out a breath she hadn't known she was holding. That night, after the children slept, she sat beside him by the fire. "You don't owe me this," she said softly. He poked at the embers. Sparks lifted into the dark. "I chose this," he said. The words settled between them, heavy, honest. Days turned to weeks. Autumn crept down the mountains. Leaves burned gold and red. The air sharpened. Eliza learned to read it now, to know when snow was coming, to prepare. She belonged. And yet, some nights, she caught Caleb standing at the edge of the valley, staring toward the high ridges, toward the place he had once called home, solitude pulling at him like an old ache. She did not ask him to stay. She did not ask him to leave. The question hovered between them, unspoken. Then, one cold morning, a familiar figure appeared at the edge of the settlement. Bent, smaller, but unmistakable. Her father. Josiah Boone stood alone this time, no rifle in hand, no hired men. Just a hat, clutched tight, and eyes hollowed by something close to desperation. Eliza felt the world narrow. Caleb stepped forward before she could move. Josiah stopped at the creek, looked around at the cabins, the smoke, the children playing. Something bitter crossed his face. "I've come to take my daughter home," he said. The valley went still. Caleb did not raise his voice, did not reach for his rifle. "She's not yours anymore," he said. Josiah laughed, a thin, broken sound. "We'll see." Eliza stepped forward then, her heart pounding but her spine straight. "No," she said. Josiah's eyes found her. For a moment, the old power flickered there. Then it died. She did not bow her head. She did not look away. And for the first time in her life, he had nothing left to strike her with. The wind moved through the valley. The people watched, waiting. Caleb shifted slightly, a subtle move, protective, final. Josiah looked at him, then at the gathered faces, then back at his daughter. And Eliza knew. This was not over yet. The wind carried the silence deeper than words ever could. Josiah Boone stood at the creek's edge, his boots sunk in mud, his shoulders slumped in a way Eliza had never seen before. This was not the towering figure of her childhood, not the voice that filled rooms and crushed resistance. This man looked worn thin by distance and defeat. But she did not mistake weariness for repentance. "I raised you," he said at last. His voice scraped, as if it had traveled a long way to reach them. "You don't belong in a place like this." Eliza felt Caleb shift beside her, a quiet reminder that she was not alone. "I belong where my children are safe," she said. Her voice shook once, then steadied. "You lost the right to decide anything for me." A murmur rippled through the valley, low, controlled, not anger, agreement. Josiah's jaw tightened. His eyes flicked to the men standing near the cabins, to the women watching from doorways, to Caleb. "You think these people will protect you forever," he sneered. "Men like him leave. They always do." Caleb said nothing. Eliza turned to him, just for a breath. She saw no hesitation in his face, no pulling away. Only presence. She turned back to her father. "Go," she said. The word felt strange on her tongue. Powerful. Josiah stared at her as if seeing her for the first time. Then something in him broke. Not cleanly, jagged, ugly. "This isn't finished," he muttered. Caleb took one step forward. "Not threatening. Final." Josiah flinched. He turned and walked away without another word, his back bent, his shadow long and small against the valley floor. The settlement exhaled. That night, the fires burned later than usual. People gathered in small clusters, speaking quietly, not celebrating, acknowledging the mountain way. Eliza sat with the twins tucked close, watching flames dance. Her hands still trembled faintly. Caleb sat beside her. "You did well," he said. The words settled deep. She nodded, unable to speak. Winter came early that year. Snow fell heavy and fast, sealing the valley in white. Work shifted indoors. Traps were checked at dawn. Fires stayed lit. The world narrowed to what could be reached on foot. Eliza adapted. She learned to smoke meat, to mend thick wool, to read the silence before a storm. Her daughters grew plump and strong, their laughter echoing inside the cabin like a blessing. And still, sometimes fear whispered. Sometimes she woke expecting to see her father's shadow at the door. Each time, it was only Caleb, standing watch, quiet as stone. One evening, as snow piled against the walls, Eliza finally asked the question that had waited too long. "Why did you stay?" she said. Caleb stared into the fire. "I was alone," he said simply. "Then I wasn't." She swallowed. Spring came slow. Meltwater cut through snow. The creek swelled and sang. Green pushed through white. With spring came movement. Traders passed through. News traveled. One afternoon, Ezra returned from the lower trails with a grim face. "Word from Ridgeway," he said. Eliza felt her stomach tighten. "Josiah Boone is dead." The words landed heavy, final. A fall, they said, drink in ice. No one claimed the body. Eliza felt nothing at first. Then something loosened in her chest. A knot she hadn't known was still there. Caleb watched her closely. That night, she cried, not for the man he was, but for the father he never chose to be. Caleb stayed beside her until the tears ran dry. Summer returned warmth to the valley. Children grew fast. Anna and Maeve took their first steps between the pines. The settlement thrived. And slowly, gently, life leaned forward. One evening, Caleb stood at the edge of the ridge, pack at his feet. Eliza knew before he spoke. "I need to go," he said. "Check the high trails. Make sure they're clear." Her heart tightened. Old fears stirred. "Will you come back?" she asked. He met her eyes. "Yes." She nodded, trusted him, let him go. Days passed, then a week. On the 8th day, a storm rolled in early. Thunder cracked against the peaks. Eliza stood in the doorway, scanning the ridges. The mountain answered with silence. That night, the wind howled. And Caleb did not return. The storm stayed through the night. Wind tore at the valley like it meant to peel it open. Rain followed, cold and sharp, rattling against the cabin roof. Eliza did not sleep. She sat with the twins pressed close, listening for footsteps that did not come. Morning broke gray and heavy. Still no Caleb. Ezra and 2 others rode out at first light. They followed the high trail, the river bend, the narrow pass where rock fell easy after rain. Eliza waited, worked, fed the girls, waited again. By dusk, the men returned. They carried Caleb between them. His leg was bound tight. Blood darkened the cloth. His face was pale, jaw clenched against pain, but his eyes were clear, alive. Eliza's breath left her in a rush so sudden it made her dizzy. She ran to him, not caring who saw, not caring how it looked. She dropped to her knees and held his hand as they laid him down. A fall, they said, loose shale, a long slide. He'd crawled for hours before they found him. Eliza cleaned his wounds with shaking hands, set the leg as best she could, packed it with snow and poultice, stayed with him through the night. He woke near dawn. "You stayed," he said. "Always," she answered. The leg healed slow, too slow for the high ridges. Caleb knew it before the others said it. His days of walking alone above the clouds were over. Not forever, maybe, but for now. He watched Eliza move through the cabin, watched the twins crawl and laugh, watched the smoke rise steady from the hearth. The mountain had changed him. One evening, weeks later, when the pain had eased and the valley glowed gold in the setting sun, he spoke. "I don't need to go back up there," he said quietly. Eliza looked at him. "I was alone because it was easier," he continued, "because no one could be taken from me." He met her eyes. "I don't want that anymore." The words were simple. They shook her all the same. She did not rush him, did not answer right away. She stepped outside with him and looked over the valley. Children played near the creek. Smoke curled from chimneys. Life moved forward. "This isn't a rescue," she said softly. "I won't be owned, or hidden." "I know," he said. "I don't want to own you. I want to stand with you." Silence stretched, comfortable, earned. She reached for his hand. That was enough. Seasons turned. Caleb built onto the cabin. Wider roof. Stronger walls. Eliza planted near the creek. The twins grew fast, their laughter loud and fearless. They called Caleb by his name first. Then, one day, something else. He didn't correct them. The mountain folk noticed, smiled, said nothing. There was no ceremony, no church bell, no papers signed. Just two people choosing, every morning, to stay. Years later, travelers would pass through the valley and hear the story. About the lone mountain man who stepped out of the shadows. About the single mother who stood up to the world. About how violence met stillness and broke. About how family was forged, not inherited. And high in the Rockies, where wind still sings through pine and stone, a home stood warm against the cold. Built not on fear, but on courage. On choice. On love that never needed to shout to be heard. If you felt this tale in your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Wild West Emotional Tales, where every story rides through the dust, the danger, and the kind of love that never dies. See you in the next tale, partner.